everybody, welcome to the 24th WSFS World Future Conference that is being performing through the Humboldt Carré at Berlin, Germany. And we are in the online program. At the online program, we have people from lots of countries, lots of the parts of the world. So today we have this session, which is called Mysterious Phases of Hybridization, a call for anticipatory hybrid governance for urban planning, AHG. And we are having as speakers Sirkka Heinonen, Joni Karjalainen, and Amos Taylor. Sorry if my pronunciation is not okay, but you know, sometimes it's difficult. Welcome the three of you, and let me introduce the three of them. So Sirkka is Professor Emerita of Futures Research at Finland Futures Research Centre, University of Turku. With over 30 years as a futures researcher at VTT Technical Research Centre of Finland, long experience in futures research, studying the perceptions of time, technology, and nature, impacts and risks of technology. Full member of the Club of Rome and chair of the Helsinki node of the Millennium Project. Projects on technology foresight, energy, cities and rural areas, sustainable knowledge, society, work, construction, housing, transport, lifestyles. Currently conducting a foresight study on real estate in sustainable crisis management in urban environments rescue. Member of editorial board in 6 journals, Futura, Futures, European Journal of Futures Research, World Futures Review, Journal of Future Studies, Futures and Foresight Science, Vice President of the Finnish Society for Future Studies. Professor Heinonen is interested in developing future studies methodologies and has launched and tested Futures Clinics, Creative Foresight Space, and Pioneer Analysis. Welcome, Sirkka.
Thank you very much.
Then we have Joni Karjalainen, and it's a doctoral researcher at Finland's Futures Research Centre, University of Turku. His current research focuses on the prospects of anticipatory governance, the energy transition, and learning from the many different crises, including future ones that could materialize, which societies could be facing. He has been a visiting scholar in the Institute for Futures Research in South Africa and the University of Sussex Science Policy Research Unit in UK. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much.
And finally, we have Amos Taylor, and he is a project researcher at Finland Futures Research Centre, University of Turku, a foresight practitioner, and is interested in the ideas on creative green transformation. Most recently, he has focused on the ethical issues concerning the long-term evolution of the bioeconomy, its potentiality, transformative solutions, and the future developments today still only in their infancy. So welcome, Amos.
Thank you, nice to be here.
So please begin, the three of you, the microphone is all yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to this session and our presentation. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Aletia, for a kind introduction. So this topic is really interesting, innovative, and experimental as well, I can say. So we made this structure for the contents of this presentation in 3 parts. We talk about first the VUCA world where we are living amongst surprises and crises. Then the second part, we touch this really interesting emerging topic, hybridization, and especially physical hybrid spaces. And the third part is also experimental. It's a new proposal for not only anticipatory governance, but anticipatory hybrid governance. And after our presentation, we have a joint presentation on these 3 sections. We welcome your comments and ideas and want to have this kind of interactive session and workshop and discussion that Aletia will be moderating then. So let's start with this first part. Many of you may be familiar with this concept of VUCA world. VUCA world is the world where we are living at the moment. It is abbreviation of the words volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. The initial letter forms this, of these four terms, forms this concept VUCA world. Volatility means that the change is like bumping from one direction to another, not only in the financial sector, and uncertainty is prevailing everywhere, and there are more and more complexity in many sectors in life. And the fourth term and concept inside this VUCA world is really interesting. It's ambiguity. Whatever we discuss together and plan cities and plan things inside a company, interpretations of things may be different. We may know something about future things or future developments, but the interpretations may differ quite a lot. So, based on this VUCA world that we are living, I would claim that we could really say that surprise is the new normal. There is much debate what is post-normal and what is new normal, but surprises is a concept that we have to start living with. We have to adopt them. We don't. Uncertainty brings surprises, volatility brings surprises, the VUCA world itself brings surprises. But let's not be panicked when these surprises emerge. And in our field of future studies, we should pay more attention, not only treating megatrends and trends, not only treating weak signals, but also paying more attention to these sudden, unexpected events and phenomena. Looking at wildcards and black swans, they merit more attention. And as Nassim Taleb has said, the world is most changed by surprises. And surprises may lead society and some sectors of society and individuals to crises. But it is better to address the crisis, embrace the crisis, not to try to hide away from crisis and not to panic. Joni will continue from this point.
One of the arguments that we would like to put forward is thinking about crisis as part of futures literacy. Of course, we already have lots of awareness of risks, crisis in society, through risk management, through disaster risk reduction strategies, through different interpretations in various sectors, quite good awareness of the nature of political risks, economic risk, and so forth. But in a complex world, one of the arguments that we would specifically like to pay attention to are future crises of emerging futures. Given that societies are changing, we must not only resort to information of the past and the present, but also to think about how the world is changing on the one hand, and the types of surprises that could come in the future, and how those could change our societies. And this understanding of multiple futures, in our view, can link crisis awareness to resilience, and resilience to multiple futures. And this is what we would call futures resilience. In practice, in a new project called Rescue by 3 Finnish universities, we are discussing different types of crises, their impacts, and not only generally in society, but linking their impacts to the built environment. After all, most of us live in urban environments, and increasingly so around the world. So how prices shape the world will have an impact on most people in those physical environments. And our colleagues have already identified, looking at especially the past and the present, but also into the futures, more than 100 different types of crises, categorized them into different categories, and used workshops to discuss their most important indirect and direct impacts. And what we're specifically interested in is next are the types of responses that in practice could emerge. So for instance, us being in Helsinki or in Finland, or someone being in London or another city, how to respond to very different types of crisis. And the framework that we are proposing to create livable, crisis-resilient cities is viewed through the notion of hybrid spaces. And what are hybrid spaces? They are a particular type of manifestation or an expression of how hybridization is shaping the world, as different types of characteristics, fields, functions, roles can come together in new types of ways. And as these new types of ways are something we are not necessarily used to, for that we need anticipatory lenses, but also the lenses of hybridization. And only by doing so, we claim, we can also think more about the appropriate responses and governance for that matter. And some of the examples of hybridization will be provided by Sirkka.
This hybridization as a phenomenon is very interesting because actually it is nothing new. These hybrid spaces may be innovative new combinations, but hybridization derives from biology, chemistry. It's a combination of different living organisms together, creating a hybrid. Then this kind of hybrid concept has moved to other disciplines and areas. So we can talk about hybrid multidisciplinary subjects which have multiple interpretations. And because they have these multiple interpretations, hybrids, they are mysterious because there are so many ambiguities and interpretations there embedded. And in ancient world, a hybrid was actually a monster, having different pieces, head from one animal and body from another. So this kind of myths taken as hybrids. So there are several different hybrids, but we can simplify it talking about hybrids as combinations. And hybridization is an increasing phenomenon in society. So we are studying especially these hybrid spaces inside the urban structure. We can also have a look at that slide from Helsinki Center. It is one example of a hybrid space. It is a combination of outdoor art gallery and Senate Square, combination of art and politics, or seriousness and playfulness. So that's just one example, and it's not a regular space or a permanent space, it's a temporary space. So hybrid spaces can be permanent or temporary. And we can also give you as a question to think, do you think that this kind of hybridization is actually accelerating, or could it hinder change as well? So we tentatively dwelled deeper now into these hybrid spaces inside city texture. And we categorized. There are several categories of hybrids. They can be combinations of different characteristics, like physical combined to digital, public combined to private, natural combined to artificial. They can be combinations of different fields, like technology combined to art, science combined to religion, health combined to agriculture, or combinations of different functions. And this is a very typical working and living, combination of living, housing, and working during the pandemic. For example, in our university, all the staff was ordered to do teleworking all the time. So housing can be also combined to mobility, learning can be combined to entertainment, etc. And the fourth category that we came up with is a combination of different roles. In a space, citizens and leaders can come together and form a joint space with different roles. So later we will ask you more ideas what kind of combinations there could be still. And then moving on, a few examples. I mentioned housing can be combined to working. It could be combined to experimental architecture as well. Another example of a hybrid space is a concrete railway station combined to botanical garden. This is from Madrid. And this is still under planning, but this is a combination hybrid space of underwater space combined to biking garage in Amsterdam. And now in our project, we started having a look at some of the pioneering hybrid spaces that there already are. And I'm now inviting Amos to present 3 cases that we chose as pioneering hybrid spaces.
So the pioneering hybrid cases are, in a way, a tangible first grasp of this concept. And these are kind of exemplary, they're well-founded examples, and we consider them future-oriented. And rather than the construction, it is the spaces and the whole, this kind of holistic view that we're interested in. And so we needed a kind of a quick tool in a way in which to start to assess and evaluate these in different ways, and especially in a futures way. So we chose kind of a positive and a negative trend. So what is a positive and negative trend that this space would illustrate? And also, of course, then what images of the future does this building imply? And what crisis is it referring to? And what kind of resilience does it offer? Another tool we used also is very simply, is it opening or closing futures? And so we look in both ways. So do hybrid spaces, what is it opening for some people and closing for others? Or what futures are there keeping open? So this unexplored future that might be coming in the future that this space allows. So hybrid spaces become kind of a testing ground for anticipatory governance. So for decision making, they're new areas. And so we could ask, so are there hybrid spaces in your neighborhood? Of course, there's always hybrid spaces, but really overt, very clear examples. What hybrid spaces would you like to see in your neighborhood, for example? And so Audi Library is one example down the road from here, actually. And it's an interesting example and kind of clear case. You maybe have heard about it. It's been well publicized, as all of these cases, I think, have been written about in many ways. In 2018, it was opened as a kind of a hybrid. It's a permanent library. It's linked to 37 other libraries across the city. So it has a kind of a normal library function, but it also is designed as a public living room and a maker space, kind of used for, it has a cinema space. It has, you can book certain working rooms there. You can use a sewing machine, or you can go and play in a games room. So it has these different multifunctional levels that can be cleared completely and used in different ways. In the image, you can see that has a nice terrace that overlooks the Senate Square. The idea is that it's a city. It's a kind of a democratic city for all. Has some problems going along with that. So it's in that way, it's opening futures for equality. It closes the futures for kind of other buildings that are exclusive and privatized and restrictive spaces. So the future image that we could see, that it represents a city of communicated well-being, a city that is equally open and accessible to all, where people and places interact and communicate in concrete and symbolic terms. So it really represents democracy, and in fact, it does have a link to European Union in its activities. So its crisis resilience, it relates to the problem of marginalization and fragmentation of in society, loneliness and isolation. So it creates a citizen space rather than and this urban experience for its citizens. So maybe next slide. And Boston Vertical is again seeing this as an architectural triumph. It's a classic example from 2014. Stefano Bore Studio, they designed it. It's a classic, literally a hybrid of a forest and a high-rise apartment building. The project idea was to green the economic, very rich economic area, but it's a congested area of pollution. But it's also linked to a green space around the whole city. But it kind of creates this green quarter. It's the kind of it incorporates this green technology, and the building is renewable. Incorporating lots of different elements of vertical farming, etc. So what it relates to is the opening of futures of a green and healthy building and lifestyle that really redefines how architecture and living could be. Of course, the closing for this is that it influences the kind of status quo, and could concrete-based construction be out the window? Buildings that do not adapt to this have a kind of a limited future. But so the future image might be then a city of fluid or urban forest, a city inviting the whole forest concept, and not just, so this could be a viral kind of idea for the whole, and it's a positive, contagious viral idea that could spread. This relates to the pollution and it contributes to climate change. And a clear example of new construction, where buildings could be part of solving the problem rather than being the problem, which often they are with concrete. But of course, it's still a vertical high-rise building, so you can imagine how it could develop still. Tempelhof Airport, Berlin, is maybe a different example, and it's very interesting because this, for us, it has a long history. It's been kind of a disused airport space. But then it was by the local referendum decided that not to use it to develop into new projects, but to keep it for cultural activities, a kind of temporary events and festivals. And locals voted against this, and that was kind of a key move. But then in recent years, there's been acute need for the refugee crisis a sudden movement of migrants coming to Berlin, and they needed housing, and so that it was in a way remarkable that this became kind of a temporary housing place for them. This, of course, created great controversy because this is kind of it's a very historical space. It has a heritage. So there's the past, present, and future elements of this hybridity space. It's functioning in many different layers. So there's kind of entangled futures. When the migrants wanted to, for example, build their own kind of homes to improve them a little bit better and actually start living there, then these issues started to come up. So what happens next? So this is opening futures for support of human migration around the world, so that opening the futures for these new Germans and new Europeans alongside a local adaptive setting. It closes the future for the airfield temporarily as a cultural hub that is being, and it might lead to the possibility that the development could take over. This offers a political window of going one way or another. So we saw this as a future image of a city of solidarity. So solidarity is maybe the underlying idea here. City authorities are hand in glove with grassroots movements, and there are cultural activities and initiatives. So this relates, of course, then to the migrant crisis, which may be an obvious creeping crisis, not a sudden one, but then it did develop suddenly into something that local areas had to react and adapt to. And this hub did. You would like to continue?
Yeah, and exactly. And because of these issues or the ways that these hybrid spaces, in our view, kind of convey some of these emerging developments or emerging futures, they have an implication as symptoms of hybridization, which has to be taken into account in governance on the whole. And therefore, the postulate we would like, or the concept we would like to put forward, is the notion of anticipatory hybrid governance. Not only governance being forward-looking and anticipatory and integrating foresight, it also seriously has to consider these new types of phenomena and take them into consideration. And that way it can become more future-oriented and take note of these emerging developments. And specifically in urban planning, what this means, potentially as reflected in the last example, is how citizens can play a key role in these developments in improving resilience, adaptation, even under crisis circumstances. And these hybrid spaces, whether there's something that already exists or can be imagined, could actually become testing grounds for anticipatory governance. And in doing so, of course, as researchers, but also in general, we're interested in the desirability, what can qualify as good or preferred hybrid spaces. To conclude, we would like to argue that in order to strive for desirable cities that are also crisis resilient, more attention needs to be paid to hybridization. And what we have briefly shown here as an introduction and to invite you to think are ways to introduce anticipatory hybrid governance into urban planning, and of course considerations of futures as a whole. And hybrid spaces are merely one example, which we gave 3 cases of for thinking of their positive and negative aspects. And how can, for instance, hybrid spaces help us in future crises, in future situations that we have not yet thought of or anticipated? These are some of the initial reactions we would like to conclude with for now. And from this, we would like to next move to an interactive part with all of you. Thank you so much for the first part of our session.
Great presentation, the three of you. So we are inviting people at the streaming to take a look at the chat Zoom, in which we are sharing the link to entering to this room so that you can interact with our three speakers. In the meantime, I don't know if maybe any of you want to add something else.
Want to add something else?
Well, I may want to add that these are like topics that are very fruitful for future studies because they are very open for different interpretations. So it will be like they are actually controversial as such. So hybrid spaces is not a preferred future as such, but it may be, but in which way? So we want to dig deeper here and deconstruct what is good in hybrid spaces and what are the elements in hybrid spaces that could promote people's well-being and on the other hand, make cities crisis resilient. So this kind of idea of crisis is here also very important, but in a sense, not to be panicked by crises, but in order to cope with them and have this kind of future's resilience.
Right, so I think that this topic is really precise for what we are living at, for we are going to live, right? Hybridization, as you mentioned, is not that easy, especially for that people that still has no access totally to this kind of text, right? So it's a big challenge.
Yes, on the other hand, it has a very positive potential. For example, people who are disabled and maybe not able to move much, they can have access through digital or virtual connections. So these kind of combinations through hybrid spaces may be beneficial as well. So, but this idea is titillating that there are positive and some pitfalls that we have to take into consideration. So we have prepared actually for you as attendants some questions we would like to hear your comments and answers on. I don't know, we have also this Flinga. You see the website address below if you want to go there.
If you want to go there, there's a space there in which you can answer questions very simply, and if you would like to write whatever you would like there to respond to some of these questions or pose more questions. It's a very simple space. I think anybody can join there if you just follow the link. It's also a secured link, so it's not open for everybody. For abuse.
Or if you want to write. If you have the chat there, you can write. We can start by question number 1. Right. It is about this tentative categorization that we made. We chose 4 angles or 4 aspects to which kind of combinations there could be, which kind of hybrid spaces there could be, combining characteristics, different fields, different functions, because very often hybrid space is really a multifunctional place, so it's very typical. But this kind of, could it be combination of roles, or could it be a combination of still something else? So the attendants, please, can you think more combinations within each of these 4 categories, or would you like to suggest still another category for these kind of hybrids or hybrid spaces? That's one question that came to my mind. And actually, while you are thinking, I might give you an example that I was reading news about this kind of smart ring Ura. Is it Alice Smart ring Ura? which is a ring. It is an ordinary, not ordinary, but looking like a ring, thick ring, but it's measuring people's personal health and all kinds of indicators. So it is a combination of a ring, accessory, and health device. There is actually a new area emerging that is called health media. So through different media, you can get information on your own personal health. So this ring is one example. So health and media combined is actually a new hybrid. But are there any answers, or would anybody like to suggest new combinations? There is a tentative list already here, but
yeah, we'll still don't have any people here at the room. And also we don't have comments in the chat yet. In the meantime, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying something?
Oh no, I was just saying that I haven't noticed anything in the Future Lab online B questioning and answer system. But yeah, one of the key futures-oriented categories, I think, is this temporal aspect. So there's the idea that buildings can be used seasonally. At daytime they can be used in a different way and can be utilized at nighttime for something completely different. Or in the summer, a building is used for one thing, and then where it's light, so maybe it's used. The light has a special aspect in that. But in the winter time, then like here, often we rely on the lighting in a different way. So these kind of aspects, it links to the temporal aspect of the past, present, and history. Buildings like the building we're in here is some hundreds of years old, so it's had many aspects, and some parts are still kind of a part of the building. Some parts have gone away, functions change, and that's a normal aspect of a building. Doesn't necessarily make it overtly hybrid, but noticing some aspects that can help in certain situations, some emergency situations, crisis situations, perceived crisis, could be a paper tiger kind of crisis as well, that we feel. And then the building is a kind of a representation of that combination of the potential crisis, the future potentiality, and it becomes these different fields and roles and functions become the new language in which we are able to talk about this thing that could happen that we don't know yet what it is.
Yes, that's another category, combination of different temporalities. We could add it, yeah.
And maybe just one example still that comes to my mind is, which is probably known to many people who, even though they would not be academics or interested in the built environment at all, but are the combinations of sports and technology. For instance, with the new technology of video assistance refereeing in football, it seems to have really split opinions on people's reactions, whether they like the technology aspect of virtual and digital combining with the old physical or the old elements of something which is considered to be a certain type or in certain form. And then when new elements are added to it, we also must come up with new concepts, and people seem to also adopt those concepts quite rapidly. And in that sense, that's something that we have been used to, or where we are spending our time. It becomes an emerging future. And before we notice, we are actually living that new moment in some sense as well. So I guess that's something that has raised quite a few waves in recent couple of years.
Yes, right. Maybe we can move on to the next question
Yes, sure.
Okay. So the next question is, what kind of hybrid spaces would be ideal, or what would you like to see in your own neighborhood? And actually, we could start by asking you, Alessia. Have you noticed in where you live in Mexico City, right?
Yes.
Can you notice or identify any hybrid spaces in your own neighborhood, or what would you like to see? These kind of spaces that are combinations of different activities or functions or characteristics. Can you think of any? And we can also share our views, because we started thinking also.
Well, like common places that you just can go and that they are in some place at any time or something. I don't identify absolutely no one. We have lots like events, which are hybrid events, that you can be like in an immersive experience, and you have like this combination of physical things, virtual things, and all that. But they are like special stuff. I actually, looking at the picture, I would like to have these spaces definitely for kids. I mean, for everybody, but I'm thinking in my own zone. So I would like to have like this kind of hybrid spaces to play in a safe way, thinking about futures in which they can play, like looking at them as grown-ups, for example, with some of these games, or playing with these, I don't remember the word right now, like holograms, I think they are, in which you are looking, at you like in a mirror, but then you are not physically as you are, no? You can look as if you were, I repeat once again, a grown-up if you are a kid, or maybe an elder if you are in the middle age or something like that. I would like to see that kind of things. And also like places which fits hope, enthusiasm, and all that kind of things, because I see that some people, especially who has like money problems or something like that, lack of money, they are so sad, they are like so anguished, so anxious. So maybe I think in some places like this, in which people can go for free and have a time in which they can just forget about the problems, and I don't know, like see beautiful things, or imagine that they are in some other place, something like that. Yeah.
Thank you, Alessia. Very interesting ideas you had. And I would like to emphasize what you mentioned, this kind of safe context. For children, they could try things safely. Yeah, that came to my mind. And also it came to my mind that hybrid space could be a space where you could overcome your phobia, for example. Like if you have the fear of heights, then you can be in a space where digitally or virtually you are climbing a very high mountain, or walking the road very high place, but in reality there's no danger of falling, that you can overcome your phobia. And for children especially, to learn safely some things. That's really interesting point of view that you made.
For children, definitely. Children are a good example, because they use the space in a completely different way.
Mm-hmm.
They use their imagination, or they perceive the space differently. And that kind of ethnographic perspective is very, very key for how we approach this, how our space is used, and at different times or in different situations. and or what is the meaning, the representation of that space for the person. So what do we translate in our mind what this space is or could be? And so childlike exploration of that subject is very good. I'm reminded of my local area. There's a old shopping mall. It's a little shopping center from the early 1960s, and now it's being prepared to be demolished. But in the meantime, it becomes the space for graffiti. It's this Portela shopping keskus, and all the walls and windows are being daily painted by young graffiti artists, actually from the school, and it's been kind of guided around, and it's transformed the building all the time. And it in a way brings together the community. It's in a safe way. It's not a kind of it's very colorful and vibrant. And it transforms the meaning of the space as well. But in a way, it's a temporary thing. It will be demolished, but it changes the neighborhood in a way. And those kind of things are interesting to explore.
Yeah. I also really like, Alicia, what you said about hope. I think that's really triggered something in my mind. And before I continue further, if there are people on the stream, you can still type the kinds of hybrid spaces you would like to see in your neighborhoods to the online chat and propose your spaces there. But concerning hope, I like the idea that sometimes we're quite set in our ways in the urban space and how we move around, and we meet the people we are used to see, and we have the hobbies that we have. And it would be quite nice to see some of those intimate mixing functions in new types of spaces. So maybe we will come to family dinners across generations in new types of spaces somewhere in the urban space, who knows? But what those spaces will be, maybe that's something we would actually be interested in.
For the next question, perhaps.
Okay. So actually, when we think about this crisis and we want to be crisis resilient, so we were thinking about studying, because it's a huge topic now, what hybrid spaces are, what kind of hybrid spaces there can be, but how they can be promoting crisis resilience. That means that how they protect us in very different futures that are emerging. So, of course, in Middle Ages and in earlier times, there were castles protecting people in villages, and in case of imminent danger, people gathered inside the walls. Brick walls. But how about hybrid spaces? How would they promote this kind of resilience and protection from crises? Can you think about any aspects of this question?
Yeah, well, maybe just to add, and while some of the participants might be thinking and contributing, I'll just add to what I was mentioning about that mixing, for instance, of generations, which could be a preemptive strategy for the aging crisis, as our demographics are changing and we're thinking about different types of interactions and how can we bring people together in different ways. Then these types of solutions could be just one small initiative. But I also see that there are some comments in the chat coming up with regards to our question. And maybe we could read one of them.
Yes, I especially like that. I love the virtual realities at the gym with screens of beautiful landscape while exercising. A nice escape for us who live in cold, dark weather countries. Exactly, that's for us as well. So, and I was thinking this kind of gym and exercises or sports, I was thinking that I would like to hear music, maybe classical music, but this is really nice to have visual beautiful landscapes around you. So that could be one possibility indeed. And then this other one, this transportation crisis is mentioned. It's also very good because it is a really concrete crisis. If let's say it's a crisis if transportation system breaks down technically, or there is some like pandemic that we are not recommended to use public transportation, or if there is a strike. So people then can go to hybrid spaces, or like they are teleworking. If they have small apartments and it's not so nice to telework, then they can go to a nearby hybrid space and enjoy the space and escape the crisis.
And I think it brings to my mind on the transport crisis is, I suppose in transport planning, there is already much talk on how to optimize transport flows and traffic flows, how to make use of different forms of modalities, different types of vehicles, and so forth. But then it also means that the spaces for which they use have to actually match. So the physical space has to enable those types of functions to happen. For that, actually what is now mentioned, time management and efficiency, actually can also be contributing to well-being, in the sense that if we have systems that function to our benefits, then we actually also end up saving time and not becoming frustrated in traffic jams or whatnot. Then there is also the comment about the housing crisis, with the example that people won't need to live in big cities, people can be spread out. That's certainly one example. And also it brings to my mind how in the city context, how can people there try and live differently? For instance, I heard recently of some people who want to change their apartments between one another just for what Amos was mentioning, temporal use or seasonal use, that you mix your housing solutions in new ways. I don't know if Amos and Sirkka, you have any thoughts about the housing aspects and the housing crisis. This is also a really interesting thought to pick up.
Well, of course, if the workload gets, people who are changing, maybe people who change and work at nighttime, shift work, they could, have the apartment only during the middle of the daytime, which they sleep in and use, and then the rest of the time, goes to somebody else who has another shift. Do we have kind of a double up? Now, with the housing, because I was posing the question, where do we go to in a crisis? What's your instinct? What buildings or what places or shelters do you immediately go to? Well, first, everybody probably thinks that I must get home, and so what is it that at home that is safer than, say, a public or a government kind of sanctioned safe place? What is it about that? So there's something there to be explored. There was a question also about the metaverse. Does a digital hybrid have a role to play in this digital and physical world? And so definitely the metaverse is another new thematic to explore. And of course, this digital overlaying, digital reality is another overlaying thing. But I could say that there's many places that are influential, like in London. There's lots of Harry Potter fans who run to the railway station where that was filmed, and it represents something different from them. So it doesn't have to be this kind of digital. It can also be literary.
Yeah, there are actually many aspects here, but this metaverse and even simple digital lives, we are living both in reality, concrete life, but we are living in digital worlds as well while we are in the internet. But I think the key thing is, can we make the difference? What is meaningful? For a person, it can be a meaningful activity to be in a digital space. It can be even more if he or she is very lonely. It can be really fulfilling and meaningful for that person to be in that digital space instead of real life. Of course, if you blur the borders, you don't really know what is real and digital and what's the difference between them. That may be confusing, perhaps, at some time. But for some people, digital world is more real than real world.
Yeah, I think we still have a couple of minutes. I wonder if we... Yeah,
we have to.
Perfect. Then we can still have time for our
final question,
concluding thoughts, namely concerning responses and the governance aspects. And we would like to ask whether hybridity requires loosening of regulations in order to function. Maybe it can also mean the tightening of regulations. That's an interesting thought. But what do you think? Any thoughts that come to your mind of these strange new combinations, especially in the urban space, but how to react to them?
Because this question brings to my mind, for example, there are very strict regulations on the use of certain buildings. And let's say at schools are used for teaching and learning. But in the evening, the schools are quite empty. So what kind of activity can be organized inside school buildings? It would be very meaningful to have different activities even during the evening time, but there may be some regulations that are saying that it's not possible. So these regulations should be loosened. On the other hand, there may be some vulnerabilities if they are loosened too much. So that's the other side of the coin.
Maybe the buildings themselves are the limitations. If you think about kindergartens in Finland, there's some kindergartens that are held in the forest. So the forest becomes the school place. There's also people who would like to be buried in the forest. So the forest becomes a graveyard. So this kind of a different kind of hybridity, not necessarily in the built space, but it definitely is a space. The forest is a natural space, and it definitely has a presence. The word I would like to propose especially for governance, is to repurpose. So we need to look what we need to repurpose, to reuse and recycle, if you like, things that could be useful for us in a kind of a crisis situation, or to become more climate resilient, or to become this kind of what could be useful for us. And I think the resilience is and repurposing are kind of together.
And maybe that has to do with the fact that, like in from the future studies point of view overall, if we do nothing, then things start feeling outdated. That's the general problem. Then also governance will not correspond to the changing reality and the world that we are living in. And that's often the case. And I think one of the comments in the chat also is pointing to some of these challenging delineations of regulations not meeting the reality of people and their needs, which is a very good example of a regulatory challenge. But now I'm wondering if we are running over. Alisa, what do you guide us?
I want to say that regarding regulation, from my point of view, some things that are not regulated become more dangerous. But definitely we need more analysis on this.
Exactly. Yes. So thank you very much on our behalf.
On slide to show on the we have.
Yes, we have the forthcoming conference we would like to show, because we appreciate these comments and opportunity to present this on this topic, because we have now started to study this, and there will be a paper, journal paper on this if you are interested, if somebody is interested in reading it. And for next summer, we have a Futures Conference on the title, on the topic of planetary futures of health and well-being. So this topic of hybrid spaces is also, we could ask, how are they promoting health and well-being at the same time as they are crisis resilient? But everybody, you are welcome to join us in this conference, and we hope to have it at least as a hybrid conference or a physical conference. So anyway, the date is already set, and it will be in Turku. So thank you very much.
Great. Hope to see you there.
Elizabeth. Okay.
Thank you to the three of you. It was great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been very interesting, and thank you also for the comments and everyone who shared their ideas. It's really nice to connect with you virtually, and sending all of you warm greetings from our small space here.
Great. Have a great time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.